Bullies leak her private photos, wrong target. She was a veteran who knew how to expose their darkest secrets. Chen had survived 3 tours in Afghanistan, but nothing had prepared her for the social warfare of Riverside Community College. At 24, Sarah moved through the campus corridors with the measured stride of someone who had learned to assess every room for exits and threats. Her military-issue backpack, faded from desert sand in time, stood out starkly among the designer bags and colorful accessories that populated the hallways of this affluent California college. The GI Bill had made her education possible, but it couldn't bridge the gap between her experiences and those of her predominantly privileged classmates. Sarah's dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore simple jeans and a plain black t-shirt that concealed the intricate tattoo covering her left shoulder, a memorial piece honoring her fallen squad members from her final deployment in Kandahar. Her phone, a sturdy model built to withstand harsh conditions, contained the only photos that mattered to her: pictures with her unit before everything went wrong, messages from her therapist about her PTSD treatment, and private selfies she'd taken during vulnerable moments in her recovery journey. The transition from military structure to civilian college life had been jarring in ways she hadn't anticipated. At 24, she was older than most of her peers, carrying experiences that aged her beyond her years. While her classmates worried about weekend parties and social media likes, Sarah grappled with hypervigilance, trust issues, and the challenge of forming connections with people who had never faced life or death situations. Riverside Community College catered to the wealthy suburb of Millbrook Heights, where students drove cars worth more than Sarah's annual living allowance and wore clothes that cost more than her monthly rent. The campus itself was pristine, with manicured lawns, state-of-the-art facilities, and an atmosphere of casual entitlement that permeated every interaction. Sarah had chosen this college specifically for its acclaimed psychology program, hoping to eventually become a counselor for other veterans struggling with their transition to civilian life. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was studying to help others with problems she was still working through herself. Her own therapy sessions had taught her the importance of boundaries, emotional regulation, and the destructive power of secrets. Lessons that would prove more valuable than she could have imagined. The military had trained Sarah in more than just combat techniques and tactical analysis. During her second tour, she had been selected for advanced intelligence gathering, where she learned digital forensics, social engineering, and the art of uncovering information that people desperately wanted to keep hidden. These skills had been essential in identifying enemy networks and protecting her unit, but she had never imagined needing them in a college setting. Her apartment off campus was sparse, but organized with military precision. A single room with basic furniture, walls bare except for one photo of her unit, and a folded American flag in a shadow box, the same flag that had draped her squad leader's coffin. The space reflected someone who had learned to live with minimal possessions and maximum readiness, always prepared to move quickly if necessary. Sarah's days followed a rigid routine that helped manage her anxiety and PTSD symptoms. Morning workouts at the campus gym before most students were awake, classes during peak hours when she forced herself to interact with others, and evenings spent studying in quiet corners of the library. She attended her therapy appointments religiously, worked part-time at a local veterans center, and maintained the discipline that had kept her alive overseas. The photography class had been an attempt to explore a creative outlet her therapist had recommended. Art therapy can help process trauma, Dr. Martinez had suggested, and Sarah had reluctantly enrolled, hoping that capturing images might help her process the visual memories that haunted her dreams. The class met twice a week in a converted warehouse studio with high ceilings and natural light that reminded her painfully of the compound, where she had lost 3 friends to an IED explosion. Her classmates in photography ranged from art majors pursuing their passion to business students fulfilling an elective requirement. Sarah kept to herself, focusing on the technical aspects of composition and lighting, while others chatted about their weekend plans and social lives. She found a certain peace in the dark room, where the red light and chemical smells created an environment completely divorced from both her military past and her uncertain civilian future. The private photos on her phone weren't explicit or compromising in any sexual sense, but they were deeply personal in ways that would be devastating if exposed. Pictures of her crying after particularly difficult therapy sessions, selfies taken during panic attacks to document her progress in managing them, images of her medication bottles and therapy worksheets, and photos of letters from the VA regarding her disability benefits. These were the visual diary of someone working through trauma, never intended for anyone else's eyes. Sarah's academic performance was exemplary, driven by the same perfectionism that had made her an outstanding soldier. She arrived early to every class, completed assignments with meticulous attention to detail, and maintained a 4.0 GPA, despite struggling with concentration issues related to her PTSD. Her professors respected her work ethic and maturity, though few understood the discipline required to maintain such standards while managing invisible wounds. The student veteran organization on campus was small, consisting of only 6 members, most of whom were older students like Sarah trying to navigate the transition from military to civilian life. They met weekly in a cramped office in the Student Services Building, sharing experiences and supporting each other through the challenges of reintegration. These meetings were the only place on campus where Sarah felt truly understood, where she could speak openly about hypervigilance, survivor's guilt, and the surreal experience of worrying about midterm exams after having worried about mortar attacks. Her military training had included extensive instruction in operational security, protecting sensitive information, and maintaining cover in hostile environments. She understood better than most students the importance of digital privacy and had carefully configured her phone and social media accounts with maximum security settings. Her Instagram account was private with only 12 followers, mostly family members and fellow veterans, and she rarely posted anything beyond generic landscape photos. The financial aid office had become a familiar second home, where Sarah regularly met with counselors to ensure her benefits were properly processed and her tuition remained covered. The administrative staff knew her story in broad strokes: veteran, PTSD, working toward a psychology degree, and treated her with a mixture of respect and pity that she found simultaneously appreciated and uncomfortable. Sarah's relationship with her family was complicated by her military service and subsequent struggles. Her parents, first-generation immigrants who had built a successful accounting firm, were proud of her service but struggled to understand her continued difficulties adjusting to civilian life. They wanted her to move on and put the past behind her, advice that reflected their love, but also their inability to comprehend the lasting impact of combat trauma. The campus counseling center had become another crucial support system, where Sarah met weekly with Dr. Martinez, a psychologist who specialized in veteran issues and understood the unique challenges of military to civilian transition. These sessions were sacred time, where Sarah could process her experiences without judgment and work on developing coping strategies for triggers and flashbacks. Her part-time work at the local veteran center involved helping newly discharged service members navigate the bureaucracy of VA benefits and civilian job searches. The work was fulfilling but emotionally taxing, as Sarah encountered others whose struggles mirrored her own. She had developed a reputation as someone who could help veterans cut through red tape and access resources, skills that required both her military training and her growing understanding of civilian systems. The quiet intensity that Sarah carried was noticeable to anyone who paid attention. She sat near exits in classrooms, maintained situational awareness in crowded spaces, and carried herself with the confident posture of someone trained for combat. Most students were too absorbed in their own lives to notice these details, but those who did often found themselves curious about her background without daring to ask direct questions. The photography studio buzzed with the casual chatter of students setting up their equipment for the weekly critique session. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, as was her habit, and methodically arranged her camera gear at a workstation near the back corner where she could observe the room's entrances and exits. The converted warehouse space with its exposed brick walls and industrial lighting fixtures reminded her uncomfortably of some of the buildings she had cleared during urban operations in Kabul. As students filtered in, Sarah recognized the familiar social hierarchies that seemed to exist in every civilian environment she encountered. At the center of the room's social gravity sat Madison Pierce, a 20-year-old blonde from one of Millbrook Heights' most prominent families. Her father owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across Southern California, and Madison carried herself with the effortless confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences for her actions. Madison's perfectly styled hair and designer clothes marked her as campus royalty, but it was her sharp intelligence and social cunning that maintained her position at the top of the student hierarchy. She had a talent for identifying weakness in others and exploiting it for entertainment, a skill that had served her well throughout high school and now college. Her laugh was musical when she was pleased, but could turn cutting and cruel when she sensed vulnerability. Flanking Madison were her two constant companions, each serving a specific role in their social ecosystem. Jessica Walsh came from old money in Newport Beach, her family's real estate empire providing the financial backing for Madison's various schemes and adventures. Jessica was tall and willowy, with the kind of effortless elegance that came from generations of private schools and country club memberships. She rarely initiated conflict herself, but was always ready to provide support and validation for Madison's decisions. The third member of their group was Chloe Kim, whose tech entrepreneur father had sold his startup to Google for 9 figures. When she was in middle school, Chloe brought a different kind of intelligence to the group. She was the one who understood social media algorithms, digital manipulation, and how to weaponize technology for social warfare. Her innocent appearance, with large glasses and a quiet demeanor, masked a calculating mind that delighted in finding creative ways to destroy reputations online. Sarah had been attending the photography class for 6 weeks without attracting significant attention from this trio. She completed her assignments competently, participated minimally in discussions, and maintained the low profile that had become second nature during her military service. Her photographs tended towards stark, documentary-style compositions that reflected her practical mindset and lack of interest in artistic pretension. The other students in the class formed their own smaller social clusters, most of them intimidated by Madison's group, but eager for any acknowledgement or acceptance. There was Kevin Martinez, an art major whose family ran a local restaurant and who genuinely loved photography but lacked the financial resources to afford the expensive equipment that others took for granted. Lisa Chen worked 2 part-time jobs to pay for school and rarely participated in social activities due to her demanding schedule. Professor Williams, a middle-aged man who had spent his career as a commercial photographer before transitioning to teaching, ran the class with professional competence but little awareness of the social dynamics among his students. He focused on technical instruction and artistic development, often missing the undercurrents of tension and competition that existed beneath the surface of classroom interactions. During this particular session, students were presenting their latest assignment, a series exploring vulnerability and authenticity. Sarah had submitted 3 carefully composed photographs of abandoned buildings in downtown Los Angeles, structures that reminded her of the bombed-out infrastructure she had documented during her deployment. The images were technically excellent, but emotionally distant, revealing nothing personal about their creator. Madison's presentation featured glossy, professionally lit self-portraits that managed to suggest vulnerability while maintaining her carefully curated image. Her artist statement discussed the performance of authenticity in social media age, demonstrating her awareness of irony while simultaneously embodying it. The presentation was well received by both the professor and her classmates, reinforcing her position as the class leader. As students packed up their equipment after the critique session, Sarah noticed Madison's group lingering near the computer stations where digital files were uploaded and stored. The college's photography lab used a shared network drive that allowed students to access each other's work for collaborative projects, though individual portfolios were supposed to remain private through password protection. Sarah's military training had taught her to pay attention to seemingly innocent activities that might indicate hostile surveillance or planning. She observed Chloe's fingers moving quickly across a keyboard while Madison and Jessica positioned themselves to block the view from other students. The behavior pattern reminded Sarah of enemy operatives she had monitored during intelligence gathering operations, and she made a mental note to check her own digital security later. The conversation she overheard while organizing her camera equipment confirmed her suspicions that something problematic was brewing. Madison's voice carried clearly in the acoustic environment of the warehouse space, and Sarah's military-trained hearing picked up fragments that concerned her. "Did you see how she just sits there like she's better than everyone?" Madison was saying, clearly referring to someone not present in their immediate group. "Never talks to anyone, acts all mysterious and superior. Someone needs to bring her down a few pegs." Jessica's response was predictably supportive. "She's probably hiding something major. People who are that secretive always have the most interesting secrets. Remember what happened with that girl from our high school who thought she was so perfect?" Chloe's contribution was more technical and therefore more ominous. "I might be able to help with that. There are ways to access things people think are private. The school's network security isn't as good as they think it is, and most people use really obvious passwords." Sarah continued organizing her equipment with practiced calm, but internally she was shifting into a higher state of alertness. Her military experience had taught her to recognize threat assessment and operational planning when she heard it, and this conversation had all the hallmarks of a coordinated attack being developed against an unspecified target. The remainder of the class period passed without incident, but Sarah noticed increased attention from Madison's group, directed toward various female students in the class. They seemed to be evaluating potential targets, looking for someone who might provide the kind of entertainment they were seeking. Their gazes lingered on Lisa Chen, who was struggling with an expensive camera she had borrowed from the equipment room, and on Emma Rodriguez, a quiet transfer student who seemed overwhelmed by the social dynamics of the class. After class, Sarah made her way to the campus library, a massive modern building with multiple floors and quiet study spaces where she could review her notes and work on assignments without distraction. The building's security systems and multiple exit routes made it one of the few places on campus where she felt completely comfortable, and she had claimed a regular spot at a corner table on the third floor. As she settled into her usual study routine, Sarah found herself unable to concentrate on her psychology textbook. The conversation she had overheard kept replaying in her mind, and her military training and threat assessment was causing her to analyze the potential implications of what Madison's group might be planning. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Dr. Martinez, her therapist, reminding her about their appointment the following day. The message included a brief check-in about her stress levels and overall functioning, routine questions that were part of their established communication protocol. Sarah appreciated the consistency and structure of their therapeutic relationship, which provided stability in an otherwise unpredictable civilian environment. The campus grew quieter as evening approached, and Sarah noticed that she was one of the few students remaining in the library. Her hypervigilance, a symptom of her PTSD that often felt like a burden, was now providing useful intelligence about potential threats developing in her immediate environment. She made a decision to increase her digital security measures and to begin monitoring the social dynamics in her photography class more carefully. Walking back to her apartment as darkness fell, Sarah reflected on the irony of her situation. She had survived combat operations against enemy forces equipped with advanced weapons and tactics, only to find herself potentially targeted by privileged college students with too much time and money. The threat assessment was different, but the fundamental challenge remained the same: identifying hostile intent and developing appropriate countermeasures. Her apartment building was a modest complex that housed primarily students and young professionals, and Sarah had chosen her unit specifically for its security features and multiple escape routes. As she climbed the stairs to her second-floor apartment, she was already formulating plans for enhancing her digital defenses and gathering intelligence about Madison's group's capabilities and intentions. The quiet of her apartment provided a stark contrast to the social complexities of campus life, and Sarah found herself grateful for the solitude that allowed her to process the day's observations and plan her next moves. The following Tuesday brought an unseasonably warm October morning to Riverside Community College, and Sarah arrived at the photography studio to find the atmosphere charged with an energy that immediately triggered her threat assessment protocols. Madison Pierce stood at the center of a larger-than-usual group of students, her voice carrying the particular tone that Sarah had learned to associate with predators who had identified their prey. Sarah positioned herself at her usual workstation and began unpacking her equipment with deliberate precision. But her attention was focused on parsing the conversation happening 15 feet away. Madison was holding court near the main computer terminal, gesturing animatedly while Jessica and Chloe flanked her like lieutenants receiving briefing instructions. "I'm telling you, there's something seriously off about the way some people think. They can just float through here without participating in the social ecosystem," Madison was saying, her voice pitched to carry to nearby students without seeming like she was deliberately broadcasting. "It's like they think they're above everyone else, too good to engage with their classmates." Emma Rodriguez, the quiet transfer student who had caught Sarah's attention during previous classes, was setting up her camera equipment with hands that trembled slightly. Emma had transferred from a community college in East Los Angeles, and everything about her demeanor suggested someone who was overwhelmed by the wealth and social complexity of Riverside. Her clothing was clean but obviously secondhand. Her equipment was borrowed from the school's inventory, and she carried herself with the hunched shoulders of someone expecting attack. Sarah recognized the body language immediately. During her military service, she had learned to identify civilians who were living under constant stress. People whose survival instincts had been activated by prolonged exposure to hostile environments. Emma displayed the same hypervigilance and defensive posturing that Sarah had observed in Afghan civilians living in contested territories. "Some people just need a reality check," Jessica added, her voice carrying the casual cruelty that came naturally to someone who had never faced real consequences. "Like, this isn't high school anymore, where you can just be weird and antisocial and expect people to leave you alone. College is about community and participating in shared experiences." Chloe's contribution was delivered in her characteristic quiet tone that somehow made her words more ominous. "I've been doing some research on our more mysterious classmates. It's amazing what you can find when you know where to look. Social media, public records, family information. People think their lives are private, but everything leaves digital footprints." Professor Williams entered the studio carrying his usual armload of equipment and handouts, apparently oblivious to the tension that was building among his students. He began setting up for the day's lesson on portrait lighting techniques, announcing that students would be working in pairs to practice capturing authentic emotional expression in their subjects. Sarah watched as Madison's group exchanged meaningful glances, the kind of coordinated communication that indicated a plan moving into its execution phase. Her military experience had taught her to recognize the moment when surveillance transitions into active operations, and every instinct was telling her that Emma Rodriguez was about to become the target of something devastating. The pairing assignments were supposedly random, but Sarah noticed that Chloe had positioned herself to volunteer as Emma's partner before anyone else could intervene. Emma looked relieved to be paired with someone who seemed quiet and non-threatening, unaware that she was being maneuvered into a trap by someone whose technical skills far exceeded her own. Understanding. As the class broke into pairs and began working on their lighting setups, Sarah found herself partnered with Kevin Martinez, the art major whose genuine passion for photography made him one of the few students in the class she actually respected. Kevin's family restaurant background had given him a work ethic and humility that stood in stark contrast to the entitled attitudes of many of their classmates. "Something's going on with Madison's crew today," Kevin murmured as they adjusted their lighting equipment, keeping his voice low enough that only Sarah could hear. "They've been acting weird all week, like they're planning something big. And did you notice how Chloe made sure to partner with Emma? That's not random." Sarah appreciated Kevin's observational skills and his willingness to acknowledge the social predation that many students preferred to ignore. "What do you know about their previous activities?" she asked, realizing that Kevin's position as a scholarship student from a working-class family might have given him insights into how Madison's group operated. "Last semester they completely destroyed this girl, Rachel, who they decided was trying to social climb," Kevin explained while adjusting his camera settings. "They found out she was on financial aid and had lied about her family's income to fit in with their group. They exposed everything on social media, shared screenshots of her aid applications, and posted pictures of her family's modest house. She ended up transferring schools." The information confirmed Sarah's assessment that Madison's group operated with the systematic cruelty of an organized campaign rather than spontaneous bullying. They identified targets, gathered intelligence, and executed coordinated attacks designed to inflict maximum social damage. This was psychological warfare conducted by people with resources and connections. Across the studio, Sarah observed Chloe working with Emma on their portrait session. To casual observation, it appeared to be a normal collaborative effort, but Sarah's trained eye caught details that concerned her. Chloe was positioning Emma in ways that seemed designed to capture her at her most vulnerable, encouraging her to share personal stories while the camera was rolling, and using lighting setups that would emphasize rather than flatter Emma's obvious insecurities. "Tell me about your family back in Leh," Chloe was saying, her voice warm and encouraging in a way that immediately raised Sarah's suspicions. "I'm always interested in hearing about people's backgrounds." It must have been a big adjustment, coming to a place like this from East LA. Emma, clearly starved for friendly interaction and acceptance, began opening up about her family's struggles with immigration status, her father's work as a day laborer, and her own fears about fitting in at a school where everyone seemed to come from money. Sarah watched as Chloe nodded sympathetically while making sure to capture every word, every vulnerable expression, every moment of authentic emotion that could later be weaponized. The technical setup that Chloe had created was more sophisticated than it appeared. She had positioned multiple cameras to capture Emma from different angles, ostensibly for the class assignment, but actually creating comprehensive documentation of their interaction. Her lighting arrangement would ensure clear, high-quality footage even though Emma wasn't aware that their conversation was being recorded as thoroughly as a professional interview. Professor Williams moved between the pairs, offering technical guidance and artistic feedback, but his focus on the mechanical aspects of photography meant he missed the psychological manipulation taking place right in front of him. When he stopped by Chloe and Emma's station, he praised their lighting setup and the authentic connection they had established, inadvertently encouraging exactly the kind of exploitation he would have been horrified to learn was taking place. Sarah found herself facing a tactical dilemma that reminded her of situations she had encountered during intelligence operations overseas. She could see a coordinated attack developing against an innocent target, but direct intervention might compromise her own position and potentially escalate the situation beyond her ability to control. Her military training emphasized the importance of gathering sufficient intelligence before taking action, but her moral instincts demanded immediate intervention to protect Emma. During the break between lighting setups, Sarah observed Madison and Jessica huddled over Chloe's phone, apparently reviewing the footage that had been captured during the first half of the session. Their expressions and body language indicated satisfaction with whatever they were seeing, and Sarah noticed Madison typing rapidly on her own device, possibly coordinating with additional people outside the classroom. The second half of the class session involved switching roles, with Emma taking photographs of Chloe. This reversal seemed to serve multiple purposes in whatever plan was being executed. It provided additional opportunities for Chloe to elicit personal information from Emma under the guise of directing her photographic technique, and it created a false sense of reciprocity that made Emma feel like she was participating in a genuine friendship rather than being systematically exploited. Sarah watched as Emma's defenses continued to erode under Chloe's carefully calibrated manipulation. The quiet transfer student began sharing increasingly personal details about her family's financial struggles, her own insecurities about attending school with wealthy students, and her fears about maintaining her scholarship. Each revelation was captured on multiple devices that Emma didn't even realize were recording. As the class period neared its end, Sarah made a decision that her military training had prepared her for, but her civilian experience had not yet required. She would begin her own intelligence gathering operation to determine the full scope of Madison's group's capabilities and intentions. If Emma Rodriguez was about to become the target of a coordinated attack, Sarah would need comprehensive information about her adversary's resources, methods, and vulnerabilities. The dismissal bell rang, and students began packing their equipment while chattering about their weekend plans. Sarah noticed that Madison's group lingered in the studio longer than usual, apparently reviewing their day's work and making plans for their next moves. Emma gathered her borrowed equipment with obvious satisfaction, apparently believing she had made genuine connections with her new classmates. Walking across campus toward the library, Sarah reflected on the irony of her situation. She had completed 3 combat tours fighting against enemies who were honest about their hostile intentions, and now she found herself preparing to engage with adversaries who hid their cruelty behind social conventions and institutional protection. Weekend passed in deceptive quiet, but Sarah's military-trained instincts told her this was the calm before a coordinated strike. She spent Saturday morning at the Veterans Center, helping a recently discharged Marine navigate the VA disability claims process, but her mind kept returning to the predatory energy she had observed in Madison's group. Sunday evening brought an ominous development that confirmed her worst suspicions about what was being planned. Sarah was reviewing her psychology textbook in her apartment when her phone buzzed with a notification from the college's internal messaging system. The message appeared innocuous enough, a reminder about an upcoming photography exhibition that would showcase student work, but something about the timing felt deliberately calculated. She had learned during her intelligence training that successful psychological operations often began with seemingly innocent communications, designed to establish patterns and test response mechanisms. Monday morning's photography class revealed the full scope of Madison's tactical preparation. Sarah arrived to find Emma Rodriguez already at her workstation, but something fundamental had changed in the quiet transfer student's demeanor. Emma's hands shook as she unpacked her equipment, and she kept glancing nervously toward the computer terminals where Chloe sat with what appeared to be casual indifference, but was actually focused surveillance. The shift in classroom dynamics was subtle but unmistakable to someone trained in recognizing social warfare. Madison moved through the studio with the confident energy of a predator who had identified her prey and was now positioning for the kill. Jessica flanked her movements, providing social cover and maintaining communication with other students who seemed to be coordinating their behavior in ways that suggested advanced planning. Professor Williams began the class with his usual technical instruction, completely oblivious to the psychological operation unfolding among his students. Today's lesson focused on documentary photography and the ethics of capturing authentic human moments, an ironic topic given what Sarah suspected was about to unfold. The professor discussed consent, representation, and the photographer's responsibility to their subjects, principles that Madison's group was preparing to violate in the most devastating way possible. During the equipment setup phase, Sarah noticed Emma struggling with her borrowed camera, apparently experiencing technical difficulties that hadn't been present during previous classes. Kevin Martinez, working at the adjacent station, quietly offered assistance, but Emma declined with the kind of brittle politeness that indicated someone operating under extreme stress. "Hey Emma," Madison called out across the studio, her voice carrying false warmth that immediately raised Sarah's alert level. "I was just telling Jessica about your amazing family story from last week. The way you talked about your dad's work ethic was so inspiring. You should totally share more of that authentic perspective with the class." Emma's face flushed with what she clearly interpreted as positive attention, but Sarah recognized the comment as a classic social engineering technique. Madison was publicly referencing private information that Emma had shared with Chloe, establishing that her personal details were now part of the group's collective knowledge, while framing the revelation as appreciation rather than violation. "Oh, thank you," Emma replied, clearly uncomfortable with the attention, but unsure how to respond appropriately. I'm still getting used to everything here. It's pretty different from my old school." "Different how?" Jessica asked, moving closer with the predatory curiosity of someone who smelled vulnerability. "I mean, Riverside is obviously amazing, but what was your previous school like? Were the students very different?" The question was designed to elicit information that could be used against Emma, forcing her to either acknowledge class differences that could be used to embarrass her or to lie in ways that could later be exposed. Sarah watched as Emma struggled with the social trap, her military experience allowing her to recognize manipulation tactics that the innocent transfer student couldn't identify. Chloe had positioned herself at the main computer terminal, apparently working on technical preparations for the day's assignment, but actually conducting what Sarah recognized as final systems checks before launching a digital attack. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with the efficiency of someone executing a well-rehearsed plan, and Sarah noticed that she had multiple browser windows open on different social media platforms. The morning's assignment involved uploading weekend photography work to the shared class folder, a routine activity that provided perfect cover for whatever Chloe was preparing to execute. Students gathered around the computer stations to transfer their files, creating the kind of crowded, distracted environment that intelligence operatives preferred for conducting covert operations. Sarah observed the sequence of events with growing certainty that Emma was about to become the victim of a coordinated character assassination designed to destroy her reputation and force her withdrawal from the college. Madison's group had spent weeks gathering intelligence, building social connections, and preparing their attack infrastructure. Now they were moving into the execution phase with military-like precision. "Emma, come upload your weekend shots," Chloe called out, patting the chair next to her at the computer terminal. "I want to see what you captured. I bet you have a really unique perspective on things, coming from a different background and all." Emma approached the computer station with obvious pleasure at being included in the group's activities, completely unaware that she was walking into a trap that had been carefully constructed over multiple weeks. She inserted her USB drive and began the file transfer process, chatting easily with Chloe about her photography techniques and artistic vision. What Emma didn't realize was that Chloe had prepared sophisticated digital infiltration tools that would activate the moment Emma's device connected to the college network. Sarah's military training in electronic warfare allowed her to recognize the signs of a cyber attack in progress, though she couldn't intervene without revealing her own technical capabilities and potentially escalating the conflict beyond her ability to control. During the file upload process, Sarah watched as Chloe's screen displayed activity that had nothing to do with the photography assignment. Multiple programs were running in the background, apparently designed to access and copy data from Emma's device while she remained focused on the legitimate file transfer. The attack was sophisticated enough to suggest either advanced technical training or access to professional-grade hacking tools. "Wow, these shots are really good," Chloe said, reviewing Emma's photography with what appeared to be genuine appreciation. "You have such an authentic eye for capturing real life. These pictures of your neighborhood are so raw and honest. Do you mind if I show Madison and Jessica? They would love to see your artistic perspective." Emma beamed with pride, apparently interpreting Chloe's interest as validation of her artistic abilities. She agreed enthusiastically to share her work, not realizing that her personal photographs were being copied and analyzed for potential exploitation. Sarah could see additional files being transferred in the background, suggesting that Chloe had gained access to Emma's entire photo library, including images never intended for public viewing. The conversation that followed revealed the full scope of the intelligence gathering operation that had been conducted against Emma. Chloe began asking detailed questions about specific photographs, demonstrating knowledge of Emma's personal life that could only have come from comprehensive surveillance of her social media accounts and digital communications. "This picture of your family at what looks like a quinceañera is beautiful," Chloe said, displaying an image on her screen that Emma had posted to her private Instagram account months earlier. "Your sister looks so young. How old is she? And is that your family's house in the background? It looks like such a close-knit neighborhood." Emma's expression shifted from pleasure to confusion as she realized that Chloe was discussing photographs that hadn't been included in her class assignments. The question seemed friendly enough, but something in Chloe's tone suggested that the information was being gathered for purposes that weren't entirely benevolent. Sarah recognized this as the final intelligence gathering phase before a coordinated attack. Madison's group was confirming their understanding of Emma's vulnerabilities while simultaneously testing her awareness of their surveillance activities. Emma's confused but compliant responses indicated that she remained unaware of the threat developing around her. Professor Williams chose that moment to call the class to attention for a group critique session, inadvertently interrupting what Sarah suspected was the final preparation phase of Madison's operation. As students gathered their equipment and moved toward the main presentation area, Sarah noticed Chloe quickly closing multiple browser windows and disconnecting Emma's USB drive with movements that suggested she had accomplished whatever objectives she had set for this phase. The critique session proceeded normally, with students presenting their weekend photography work and receiving feedback from both the professor and their classmates. Emma's presentation was well received, her documentary style images of East Los Angeles earning praise for their authenticity and emotional impact. She seemed to relax slightly under the positive attention, unaware that her personal details were being weaponized even as she received artistic validation. Madison's presentation featured polished images of Millbrook Heights social events, technically competent but emotionally sterile compared to Emma's raw documentary work. However, Madison's confidence and social connections ensured enthusiastic responses from most of the class, reinforcing the social hierarchy that would soon be used to devastating effect against Emma. As the class period ended and students began Packing their equipment, Sarah overheard fragments of conversation between Madison and Jessica that confirmed her worst suspicions about what was being planned. "Everything's ready for tomorrow," Madison was saying, her voice low but carrying, clearly to Sarah's trained hearing. "Chloe got everything we need, and the timing is perfect. By Wednesday, Little Miss Authentic Reality will understand exactly where she fits in the social ecosystem here." Tuesday arrived with an unseasonable chill that seemed to mirror the tension Sarah felt building across campus. She had spent Monday evening conducting her own reconnaissance, using skills learned during intelligence operations to map out Madison's group's digital footprint and social connections. What she discovered confirmed her assessment that Emma Rodriguez was about to face a coordinated assault that would devastate her reputation and potentially destroy her academic future. Sarah's investigation had revealed that Madison's influence extended far beyond their photography class. The Pierce family's wealth had purchased social connections throughout Millbrook Heights, from the country club where local politicians gathered to the charity boards where college administrators' wives networked. Madison herself had cultivated relationships with student government leaders, sorority presidents, and the editors of both the campus newspaper and the popular gossip blog that shaped undergraduate social dynamics. The morning photography class proceeded with deceptive normalcy, but Sarah's hypervigilance detected subtle changes in behavior patterns that indicated the operation was moving toward execution. Emma arrived looking exhausted, her usual nervous energy replaced by a bone-deep weariness that suggested she had spent the night struggling with anxiety about problems she couldn't yet identify. Her hands trembled as she unpacked her equipment, and she kept checking her phone with the compulsive frequency of someone expecting bad news. Madison entered the studio with the predatory confidence of someone who knew the outcome of a game before it began. She carried herself with theatrical casualness, chatting easily with other students while her eyes tracked Emma's movements with the focused attention of a hunter watching prey. Jessica and Chloe flanked her in their usual formation, but today their coordination seemed more military than social, as if they were bodyguards protecting a commanding officer during a sensitive operation. Professor Williams announced that today's class would focus on digital portfolio development, requiring students to curate and present their best work using the college's online exhibition platform. The assignment seemed routine enough, but Sarah recognized it as providing perfect cover for whatever Madison's group was planning to unleash. The digital platform would ensure maximum visibility for any content that was shared, and the class presentation format would create an audience for Emma's humiliation. During the setup phase, Sarah noticed that several students who didn't normally attend photography class had gathered in the hallway outside the studio. They appeared to be waiting for something, checking their phones repeatedly and whispering among themselves with the excited energy of people anticipating entertainment. The audience was being assembled for whatever spectacle Madison had orchestrated. Emma worked alone at her computer station, apparently unaware that she had become the center of hostile attention. She scrolled through her photographs with genuine artistic consideration, selecting images that represented her best technical and creative work. Her focus on the assignment was complete, the kind of academic dedication that had earned her the scholarship that made attending Riverside possible. Chloe positioned herself at the computer terminal directly adjacent to Emma's workstation, ostensibly working on her own portfolio but actually conducting final preparations for the attack. Sarah observed her opening multiple browser windows and applications, creating what appeared to be a comprehensive media distribution system designed to simultaneously broadcast content across multiple platforms. "Hey Emma," Madison called out, her voice carrying across the studio with false friendliness. "I saw some of your family photos yesterday, and they were absolutely gorgeous. You should totally include some of those personal shots in your portfolio. They show such authentic emotion compared to all the sterile technical stuff most people submit." Emma looked up from her computer with genuine confusion. "I didn't show you any family photos yesterday. We only shared our weekend assignment work during the critique session." The momentary silence that followed Emma's response crackled with tension as Madison's group exchanged meaningful glances. Sarah recognized this as the moment when their surveillance activities had been inadvertently exposed, forcing them to accelerate their timeline and move into attack mode earlier than planned. "Oh, I must have seen them on your social media," Madison replied smoothly, but her eyes had hardened in a way that indicated Emma had just sealed her fate. "You know how it is. Everyone checks out the new students' accounts to get to know them better. It's totally normal college behavior." Emma's face flushed with embarrassment as she realized that her privacy had been violated, but she lacked the social experience to understand the full implications of what was happening. "My Instagram is private," she said quietly. "I only have like 15 followers, mostly family and friends from home." Chloe spoke up with the innocent tone that had become her signature manipulation technique. "Privacy settings aren't as private as people think they are. There are lots of ways to see things that people post online, especially when they use the same username across multiple platforms. It's not really stalking or anything weird, just basic social media literacy." The explanation was designed to gaslight Emma into believing that her privacy violation was normal behavior, while simultaneously threatening her with the knowledge that her digital life had been comprehensively surveilled. Sarah watched as Emma's confusion deepened, her lack of experience with predatory social dynamics leaving her unable to recognize the psychological warfare being conducted against her. Professor Williams began calling students to present their digital portfolios, starting with volunteers and working through the class roster alphabetically. The presentation format required students to project their work on the main screen while explaining their artistic choices and technical development. Emma would be presenting in the middle of the session, providing maximum audience for whatever Madison had planned. As the first few presentations proceeded, Sarah noticed increasing activity on the phones of students throughout the studio. Messages were being sent and received with unusual frequency, and several students kept glancing toward Emma with expressions that suggested they were waiting for something specific to happen. The digital coordination reminded Sarah of the communication patterns she had observed before coordinated attacks in combat zones. When Emma's turn arrived, she moved to the front of the class with obvious nervousness, but also genuine pride in her work. Her portfolio showcased her documentary photography of East Los Angeles, capturing the dignity and resilience of her community, with an artist's eye for composition and a native's understanding of cultural authenticity. The images were powerful and moving, representing exactly the kind of artistic vision that Professor Williams had been encouraging students to develop. These photographs demonstrate exceptional emotional intelligence and technical competence, Professor Williams commented as Emma navigated through her portfolio. "The way you've captured authentic human moments while maintaining respect for your subjects shows real artistic maturity. This is documentary photography at its finest." Emma beamed with pride at the professor's praise, and for a moment it seemed like she might escape whatever trap had been set for her. Her presentation was genuinely excellent. Her artistic vision was clearly superior to most of her classmates' work, and the academic validation she was receiving should have established her reputation as a serious photographer rather than a target for social predation. But Sarah recognized that Madison's group had been waiting for exactly this moment of vulnerability, when Emma's guard was down and her confidence was building. As Emma advanced to the final section of her portfolio, Chloe's fingers began moving rapidly across her keyboard, apparently triggering whatever digital assault had been prepared. The attack, when it came, was swift and devastating. Emma's computer screen suddenly filled with images that she had never intended to share publicly, personal photographs from her private phone that had somehow been accessed and were now being broadcast to the entire class. The images weren't explicit or inappropriate, but they were deeply personal. Pictures of Emma crying after receiving her scholarship notification, selfies taken during panic attacks, photos of her family's modest home, images of her father in his work clothes looking exhausted after a day of manual labor. "Oops," Chloe said with mock innocence. "Looks like your portfolio got mixed up with some other files. These are way more authentic than your official photography. Should we talk about the artistic vision behind these candid shots?" Emma stared at the screen in horror as her most vulnerable moments were displayed for public consumption. The photographs had been carefully selected to maximize her humiliation, images that revealed her financial struggles, her emotional fragility, and her family's working-class background in the most unflattering possible light. "Turn it off," Emma whispered, reaching for the computer controls. But Chloe blocked her access with apparent clumsiness that was actually calculated obstruction. "Hold on, let's analyze these properly," Madison called out, rising from her seat with theatrical concern. "I think there's some really important artistic development happening here. Emma's showing us the difference between performed authenticity and real vulnerability. This is like a master class in documentary truth-telling." The cruelty of the moment was breathtaking in its precision. Madison had weaponized the professor's own artistic values, turning Professor Williams' emphasis on authenticity and emotional truth into justification for Emma's public humiliation. The academic framework provided intellectual cover for what was clearly calculated psychological torture. Students throughout the studio were now actively filming the presentation with their phones, capturing Emma's breakdown for distribution across social media platforms. Sarah watched as Emma's face crumpled under the weight of public exposure. Her artist's pride transformed into devastating shame as her most private moments became entertainment for classmates who had never shown her genuine acceptance. Professor Williams finally intervened, apparently recognizing that something inappropriate was happening, even if he didn't understand the full scope of the attack. "That's enough," he said, moving toward the computer terminal. "Let's return to Emma's official portfolio presentation." But the damage had been done. Emma stood frozen at the front of the class, tears streaming down her face as she realized that her privacy had been systematically violated and her most vulnerable moments had been weaponized against her. The silence in the studio was deafening, broken only by the soft sounds of phone cameras capturing her breakdown for permanent digital recording. The studio erupted into chaos as Emma's breakdown intensified, her sobs echoing off the brick walls, while students continued filming her humiliation with their phones. Sarah watched from her corner workstation as the predatory dynamics she had predicted played out with devastating precision. Emma had collapsed into the chair at the presentation station, her hands covering her face as she struggled to process the violation of her privacy and the calculated cruelty of her public exposure. Professor Williams stood frozen near the computer terminal, clearly recognizing that something terrible had happened, but lacking the technical knowledge to understand how Emma's private photographs had appeared in her portfolio presentation. His artistic sensibilities were offended by what he perceived as a technical malfunction, but he remained oblivious to the psychological warfare that had been orchestrated by his own students. Madison moved through the chaos with the satisfied confidence of a general watching a successful military operation unfold. She approached Emma with theatrical concern, her voice carrying false sympathy that fooled no one except perhaps Professor Williams. "Oh my God, Emma, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Technology can be so unpredictable. But honestly, those personal photos show such raw emotion. You're like a natural documentary photographer, even when you don't mean to be." The comment was expertly designed to twist the knife deeper into Emma's wounds while maintaining plausible deniability about malicious intent. Madison was framing Emma's private pain as artistic material, suggesting that her most vulnerable moments were somehow public property worthy of critique and analysis. The intellectual framework provided cover for cruelty, while ensuring that any complaint Emma might make would sound like she was overreacting to legitimate artistic discussion. Jessica positioned herself to block the exit route nearest to Emma, apparently casually, but actually ensuring that the victim remained trapped in the center of the attention. She was desperately trying to escape. Her contribution to the attack was subtle but effective, using her physical presence to maintain the containment that kept Emma exposed and vulnerable to continued assault. Chloe had returned to her computer terminal and was rapidly typing across multiple applications, apparently managing the digital distribution of content that had been captured during Emma's presentation. Sarah's military training allowed her to recognize the signs of a coordinated information warfare operation designed to ensure that Emma's humiliation would follow her far beyond the physical boundaries of the photography studio. The other students in the class were responding to the situation with a mixture of horrified fascination and social cowardice that confirmed Sarah's assessment of civilian bystander behavior under pressure. Most were recording the event with their phones, apparently viewing Emma's breakdown as entertainment rather than recognizing it as the result of systematic psychological assault. A few looked uncomfortable but made no move to intervene or offer support to the victim. Kevin Martinez appeared to be the only student besides Sarah who understood the malicious nature of what was happening. He had moved closer to Emma's position and was attempting to offer quiet support, but his efforts were being undermined by the crowd dynamics that Madison's group had skillfully manipulated to maintain their control over the situation. "Maybe we should call campus security," Kevin suggested to Professor Williams, recognizing that the situation had escalated beyond normal classroom management. "This seems like it might be some kind of privacy violation or cyber attack. Emma's personal photos shouldn't have been accessible through the class network." Professor Williams nodded uncertainly, clearly out of his depth when it came to managing the technical and social complexities of what had occurred. "Yes, perhaps that would be appropriate. This does seem like an unusual technical malfunction. Emma, would you like me to contact the IT department to investigate how your personal files became mixed with your class portfolio?" The suggestion of involving campus authorities caused a visible shift in Madison's group's behavior. They exchanged quick glances that suggested contingency planning was being activated, and Sarah noticed Chloe's fingers moving even more rapidly across her keyboard as she apparently implemented whatever digital cleanup protocols had been prepared for this scenario. Emma finally found her voice, though it was barely above a whisper and thick with tears. "I just want to go home. I don't want to be here anymore. Please, I just want to leave." The defeat in Emma's voice was devastating to hear, representing the complete success of Madison's campaign to break her spirit and force her withdrawal from the college environment. Sarah recognized this as the ultimate objective of the entire operation, not just to humiliate Emma, but to make her so uncomfortable that she would remove herself from the social ecosystem rather than continue to challenge the established hierarchy. "Of course you can leave," Professor Williams said gently, his artistic sensibilities finally overriding his confusion about the technical aspects of the situation. "Take whatever time you need. We can discuss this privately later when you're feeling more composed." As Emma gathered her belongings with shaking hands, several more students entered the studio from the hallway, where they had apparently been waiting for exactly this moment. They carried phones that were already recording, suggesting that the timing of their arrival had been coordinated to capture Emma's exit as part of the broader documentation of her humiliation. Sarah made a decision that her military training had prepared her for, but her civilian experience had not yet required. She rose from her workstation and walked directly toward Emma, her movement cutting through the crowd of students with the purposeful stride of someone accustomed to taking command in crisis situations. "Emma," she said quietly, her voice carrying the calm authority that had kept her squad functional during combat operations. "I'll walk out with you. You shouldn't have to deal with this alone." Emma looked up at Sarah through her tears, apparently surprised that anyone was offering genuine support rather than either filming her distress or offering false sympathy. "I don't even know you," she whispered. "Why would you help me?" "Because what happened to you was wrong," Sarah replied simply, extending her hand to help Emma gather her scattered equipment. "And because no one should have to face this kind of attack without backup." The word choice was deliberate, drawn from Sarah's military vocabulary but applicable to the current situation. She was identifying the coordinated assault against Emma as exactly what it was: a strategic attack that required tactical response rather than passive acceptance or individual coping strategies. Madison stepped forward, apparently recognizing that Sarah's intervention represented a potential threat to the narrative control that was essential for maintaining the success of their operation. "I'm sorry, but I don't think we've been properly introduced. I'm Madison Pierce, and you are?" The introduction was delivered with false politeness that barely concealed a threat assessment. Madison was sizing up Sarah as a potential ally or enemy, testing her willingness to be drawn into the social dynamics that governed interactions at Riverside Community College. "Sarah Chen," Sarah replied, meeting Madison's gaze with the steady eye contact she had learned during military leadership training. "And I think Emma has had enough excitement for one day." The response was diplomatic but firm, establishing Sarah's position without unnecessarily escalating the confrontation. She had learned during intelligence operations that the most effective counterattacks often began with deceptively mild responses that didn't reveal the full scope of available capabilities. Chloe looked up from her computer terminal, apparently recognizing Sarah's name from whatever background research Madison's group conducted on their classmates. "Wait, aren't you a veteran? The one who never talks to anyone and sits in the back corner like she's too good for everyone else?" The comment was designed to isolate Sarah by characterizing her reserved behavior as arrogance rather than recognizing it as the hypervigilance and social caution that resulted from combat trauma. But the attempt to frame Sarah as antisocial revealed that Madison's group had indeed been conducting surveillance on multiple potential targets, not just Emma. "I talk when I have something worth saying," Sarah replied, helping Emma organize her camera equipment while maintaining awareness of the hostile attention now focused on both of them. "Right now, I think Emma needs to get some air and decompress from whatever technical difficulties affected her presentation." The diplomatic language provided Emma with a face-saving explanation for what had happened while simultaneously offering Madison's group an opportunity to claim that the attack had been accidental rather than deliberate. Sarah was providing an exit ramp that could prevent further escalation while protecting Emma from additional assault. Professor Williams seized on Sarah's suggestion with obvious relief. "Yes, excellent idea. Emma, please take the rest of the day to recover from this unfortunate incident. We'll sort out the technical issues and make sure your portfolio presentation can be completed properly next class." As Sarah and Emma gathered their belongings and moved toward the exit, the crowd of students parted to create a corridor that felt more like a gauntlet than a pathway. Phone cameras continued recording their departure, apparently documenting this phase of the operation for whatever social media campaign Madison's group had planned to sustain. Emma's humiliation beyond the immediate classroom environment, the hallway outside the photography studio, felt like a refuge after the charged atmosphere inside. But Sarah's military training reminded her that tactical withdrawal was only the first phase of an effective response to enemy contact. Emma's immediate safety had been secured, but the threat that had been revealed would require comprehensive countermeasures to prevent future attacks. Emma collapsed against the hallway wall as soon as they were outside the studio, her emotional reserves finally exhausted by the sustained assault on her dignity and privacy. "I can't believe they did that to me," she whispered. "I trusted them. I thought Chloe was being friendly when she asked about my family." Sarah guided Emma to a quiet alcove near the campus library, away from the main pedestrian traffic where curious students might continue the documentation of Emma's distress. The location provided multiple exit routes and clear sight lines, tactical considerations that had become second nature during Sarah's military service, but were now proving essential for civilian crisis management. Emma slumped against the brick wall, her entire body shaking as the full scope of her violation began to register. The photographs that had been displayed weren't just embarrassing. They represented her most vulnerable moments, carefully curated to expose every insecurity and financial struggle that she had worked desperately to hide from her affluent classmates. "They had pictures of my dad," Emma whispered, her voice breaking with fresh tears. "Pictures of him coming home from work, covered in paint and looking exhausted. Pictures of our apartment that I took to send to my grandmother back in Mexico. Pictures of me crying when I got my scholarship letter because I couldn't believe I was actually going to college." Sarah listened to Emma's catalog of violations, while conducting her own mental inventory of the intelligence-gathering operation that had been conducted against the innocent transfer student. The photographs that had been displayed represented weeks or months of systematic surveillance, requiring technical skills and social engineering techniques that suggested Madison's group had access to sophisticated resources. How did they get those pictures? Emma continued, her confusion evident in every word. "They were on my phone, in my private photo album. I never posted them anywhere. I never shared them with anyone at school. Some of them I took just for myself, like diary entries, but with pictures instead of words." The technical aspects of the privacy violation concerned Sarah more than Emma yet understood. Gaining access to photographs stored locally on a smartphone required either physical access to the device or sophisticated hacking capabilities that went far beyond typical college student knowledge. The attack represented a level of digital intrusion that might constitute criminal activity under state and federal privacy laws. "When you connected your USB drive to Chloe's computer yesterday, did you notice anything unusual about the transfer process?" Sarah asked, her military training in technical security making her suspect that the device connection had been used to install malware or extract data from Emma's phone. Emma's eyes widened as she began to understand the implications of Sarah's question. "She kept asking me to unlock my phone to show her different pictures while the files were being uploaded. She said she wanted to see more of my artistic perspective. I thought she was just being friendly and interested in my work." The social engineering technique was textbook perfect, creating a legitimate reason for the target to provide access to their device while conducting a technical operation that the target couldn't recognize. Chloe had combined technical exploitation with psychological manipulation to gain comprehensive access to Emma's digital life. Sarah felt the familiar surge of tactical thinking that had kept her alive during combat operations. Madison's group had revealed capabilities that went beyond typical college bullying, demonstrating coordination, technical sophistication, and strategic planning that suggested they had conducted similar operations against other targets. Emma wasn't their first victim. She was simply their most recent conquest in an ongoing campaign of social warfare. "Emma, I need you to think carefully about this next question," Sarah said, her voice carrying the serious tone she had used when briefing her squad before dangerous missions. "Have you noticed any other unusual activity on your social media accounts or your phone over the past few weeks? Messages from people you don't know, friend requests from suspicious accounts, apps that you don't remember downloading?" Emma wiped her tears with the back of her hand and tried to focus on Sarah's question. "There was this Instagram account that requested to follow me about 2 weeks ago. The profile looked like another student, but when I checked, they didn't have many posts and their followers seemed fake. I denied the request, But then I got friend requests on Facebook and Snapchat from accounts with similar profile pictures. The pattern confirmed Sarah's assessment that Emma had been targeted for comprehensive digital surveillance using multiple attack vectors. The fake social media accounts represented a coordinated intelligence gathering operation designed to map Emma's digital footprint and identify potential vulnerabilities for exploitation. And yesterday, after I got home from photography class, my phone kept buzzing with notifications from apps I barely use. Emma continued, her voice gaining strength as she began to understand the scope of what had been done to her. Instagram, TikTok, even LinkedIn. It was like someone had activated every social media account I'd ever created. Sarah recognized this as evidence of ongoing digital infiltration, suggesting that Emma's devices had been compromised and were being used to broadcast her humiliation across multiple platforms simultaneously. The technical coordination required for such an operation indicated that Madison's group had access to either professional-grade hacking tools or technical expertise that exceeded typical college student capabilities. At the sound of approaching footsteps caused Sarah to shift into defensive positioning, her body automatically placing itself between Emma and the potential threat. Kevin Martinez appeared around the corner, carrying both his and Emma's camera bags, his expression showing genuine concern rather than the voyeuristic curiosity that had characterized most of their classmates' responses. "I grabbed your equipment before anyone could mess with it," Kevin said, offering Emma her camera bag. Professor Williams dismissed class early and told everyone to stop filming, but I don't think many people listened. Madison's crew was still working their phones when I left. The information confirmed that the digital assault was continuing beyond the immediate classroom incident, with Madison's group apparently coordinating the distribution of content across their social networks to ensure maximum viral spread of Emma's humiliation. "Kevin, what do you know about Chloe's technical background?" Sarah asked, recognizing that Kevin's position as a scholarship student might have given him insights into the resources and capabilities of their wealthier classmates. Kevin's expression darkened as he considered the question. Her dad sold some kind of tech company to Google for like $100 million when she was in high school. She's always been weird about computers and social media, like she knows things that normal people don't. Last semester she helped Madison destroy that girl Rachel by somehow getting access to her private messages and financial aid documents. The revelation provided crucial intelligence about Madison's group's previous operations and confirmed that they had a history of using technical exploitation to conduct character assassination campaigns against targets they deemed threatening to their social dominance. There were rumors that Chloe actually hacked into the school's financial aid database to get Rachel's information. Kevin continued, lowering his voice to ensure their conversation remained private. Nobody could prove anything, and Rachel was too scared and embarrassed to make a formal complaint. She just transferred to a different school and tried to pretend the whole thing never happened. Sarah felt her tactical assessment crystallizing around a clear understanding of the threat they were facing. Madison's group wasn't conducting random bullying or spontaneous cruelty. They were operating a systematic campaign of psychological warfare against students who threatened their social dominance, using technical capabilities that might constitute criminal activity under state and federal laws. Emma looked between Sarah and Kevin with growing horror as she realized that her experience wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of calculated attacks against vulnerable students. "How many other people has this happened to?" she whispered. "Rachel was the most public case, but there have been others," Kevin replied grimly. "Quiet transfers, sudden withdrawals, students who just disappeared from campus without explanation. Madison's group has been running this place like their personal kingdom for years, and they eliminate anyone who doesn't fit their social order." The intelligence painted a picture of an ongoing criminal enterprise disguised as college social dynamics, with Madison's group using wealth, technical capabilities, and institutional connections to maintain their dominance through systematic intimidation and character assassination. Sarah's military training provided her with frameworks for understanding and responding to this type of threat. Madison's group was conducting asymmetric warfare against individual targets, using superior resources and coordination to overwhelm victims who lacked the technical knowledge or social connections to mount effective resistance. "Emma, I want you to go home and turn off your phone," Sarah said, her voice carrying the authority of someone issuing tactical orders. "Don't post anything on social media, don't respond to messages or comments, and don't try to defend yourself online. Anything you say right now will be used against you to escalate the situation." Emma nodded, recognizing the military bearing in Sarah's voice, even if she didn't understand its origins. "What are you going to do?" she asked. Sarah looked toward the photography studio where Madison's group was likely still coordinating their social media campaign, her expression shifting into the focused determination that had carried her through combat operations against enemy forces. "I'm going to conduct some reconnaissance," Sarah replied, using military terminology that felt more appropriate than civilian alternatives. Madison's group made a tactical error when they revealed their capabilities today. "They've shown me exactly what kind of threat they represent, and now I'm going to gather the intelligence I need to neutralize that threat permanently." Kevin looked between Sarah and Emma with growing excitement as he began to understand that Sarah might actually be capable of challenging Madison's group's dominance. "You're really going to take them on? Do you know what you're getting into? They have connections, money, and apparently some serious technical capabilities." "I've faced worse," Sarah said simply, her tone carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had survived combat operations against professional enemy forces. "And, unlike their previous targets, I have the training and experience to fight back effectively." That evening, Sarah transformed her sparse apartment into an operational command center, drawing on skills she had developed during intelligence-gathering missions in Afghanistan. Her military-issued laptop sat open on her small dining table, surrounded by notebooks filled with reconnaissance data and tactical assessments that would have been familiar to any intelligence analyst preparing for a complex operation against a well-resourced enemy. The digital investigation began with open-source intelligence gathering, a methodical process of mapping Madison's group's online presence across multiple platforms and social networks. Sarah's training in electronic warfare had taught her that every digital action left traces, and people who believed themselves untouchable often made mistakes that revealed their vulnerabilities to someone who knew where to look. Madison Pierce's social media presence was extensive and carefully curated, presenting the image of a privileged college student living an enviable lifestyle of parties, shopping trips, and social events. But Sarah's analytical training allowed her to identify patterns beneath the surface glamour that revealed operational security weaknesses and potential pressure points. The Pierce family's wealth was prominently displayed across Madison's accounts, with tagged locations at exclusive restaurants, luxury resorts, and private events that established clear patterns of behavior and social connections. More importantly for Sarah's purposes, the posts revealed a network of relationships that extended throughout the local business and political community, providing Madison with institutional protection that explained how her group had operated with impunity for so long. Chloe Kim's digital footprint was more technically sophisticated, but also more revealing to someone with Sarah's background in cyber intelligence. Her social media accounts showed careful privacy settings and limited personal information, but her digital behavior patterns indicated someone with advanced technical capabilities who had grown careless through success and overconfidence. Investigation revealed that Chloe maintained multiple online identities across various platforms, apparently using fake accounts to conduct surveillance and gather intelligence on potential targets. Her technical forums and coding repositories showed expertise in social engineering, data extraction, and mobile device exploitation that confirmed Sarah's assessment of the group's capabilities. Jessica Walsh's online presence focused primarily on lifestyle content and social validation, but her digital connections provided crucial intelligence about the group's broader social network and institutional support systems. Her family's real estate empire had created relationships with local politicians, college administrators, and community leaders who formed a protective web around Madison's operations. The technical analysis revealed sophisticated coordination between the three accounts, with synchronized posting schedules and coordinated messaging campaigns that indicated professional-level social media manipulation. Sarah recognized the patterns from her military training in information warfare, where similar techniques were used to shape public opinion and manipulate target populations. More disturbing was the evidence Sarah uncovered of previous campaigns against other students. Careful analysis of posting patterns and deleted content revealed systematic attacks against at least 6 other students over the past 2 years, each following similar patterns of intelligence gathering, character assassination, and social isolation that had driven their targets to withdraw from the college environment. The technical evidence suggested that Chloe had developed increasingly sophisticated methods for gaining unauthorized access to target devices and private accounts. Sarah's cybersecurity training allowed her to identify the digital signatures of malware deployment, social engineering attacks, and privacy violations that would likely constitute criminal activity under federal computer fraud and abuse statutes. But the most significant discovery came when Sarah cross-referenced the timing of Madison's group's attacks with changes in college enrollment and transfer patterns. The data revealed a systematic campaign of social warfare that had driven away dozens of students who posed potential challenges to the established social hierarchy, with particular targeting of scholarship recipients, transfer students, and anyone from working-class backgrounds. The pattern represented more than bullying. It constituted organized discrimination designed to maintain the socioeconomic exclusivity of Riverside Community College despite its public mission and state funding. Madison's group was essentially conducting ethnic and class cleansing through psychological warfare, using their technical capabilities and institutional connections to eliminate students who didn't conform to their preferred demographic profile. Sarah's military training provided her with frameworks for responding to this type of systematic oppression. During her service in Afghanistan, she had worked with local populations who were being terrorized by well-funded extremist groups that used similar tactics of intimidation, character assassination, and social isolation to maintain control over civilian communities. The solution required the same approach that had proven effective against insurgent networks: comprehensive intelligence gathering, identification of key vulnerabilities, and coordinated counter-operations designed to disrupt the enemy's capability and will to continue their attacks. Sarah spent 3 hours documenting Madison's group's digital activities, creating detailed profiles of their operational methods, social connections, and technical capabilities. Her analysis revealed that their strength came from coordination, technical sophistication, and institutional protection. But these same advantages created vulnerabilities that could be exploited by someone with appropriate skills and determination. The profited financial investigation proved particularly revealing, as Sarah used her intelligence training to map the flow of resources that supported Madison's operations. The Pierce family's business interests included several contracts with the college itself, creating potential conflicts of interest that explained the administration's apparent reluctance to investigate complaints against Madison's group. Chloe's technical operations were funded through her family's wealth, but also showed evidence of commercial-grade surveillance tools and hacking software that suggested either direct purchase of professional capabilities or consultation with actual cybercriminal organizations. The level of technical sophistication exceeded what any college students should have been able to develop independently. Jessica's role appeared to focus on social engineering and institutional manipulation, using her family's connections to influence college administrators, local media, and community leaders who might otherwise intervene in Madison's campaigns against vulnerable students. The psychological profiles that Sarah developed revealed a group dynamic that combined narcissistic entitlement with genuine maliciousness, driven by a worldview that saw working-class and minority students as threats to their social dominance rather than legitimate members of the college community. By midnight, Sarah had assembled a comprehensive intelligence package that mapped Madison's group's capabilities, methods, vulnerabilities, and institutional support systems. The analysis revealed multiple potential pressure points that could be exploited to neutralize their operational effectiveness and protect future targets from similar attacks. The evidence also suggested several potential criminal violations that could be referred to law enforcement if handled properly, including computer fraud, identity theft, harassment, and conspiracy charges that could result in serious legal consequences for all three members of Madison's group. But Sarah's military experience had taught her that legal processes were often too slow and uncertain to protect immediate victims or prevent ongoing attacks. Emma Rodriguez needed protection now, not after months of legal proceedings that Madison's family wealth could easily delay or derail through expensive lawyers and political connections. The tactical solution required a coordinated counter-operation that would simultaneously protect Emma, expose Madison's group's criminal activities, and demonstrate to the broader college community that their systematic oppression of vulnerable students would no longer be tolerated. Sarah's planning drew on principles of psychological warfare that she had learned during counterinsurgency operations, where the objective was not just to defeat enemy forces but to undermine their credibility and support among the civilian population they claimed to represent. The operation would need to be executed with precision timing to maximize impact while minimizing the opportunity for Madison's group to activate their institutional protection or launch counterattacks against Emma or other potential witnesses. Sarah closed her laptop and reviewed her handwritten tactical notes, feeling the familiar focus that had carried her through dangerous missions and combat zones. Madison's group had made the same mistake that many enemies made when facing military-trained opponents. They had underestimated their target and revealed their capabilities prematurely. The intelligence gathering phase was complete. Tomorrow would begin the active counter-operation that would expose Madison's group's criminal activities and demonstrate that their years of operating with impunity were about to end. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from Emma. "Can't sleep. Keep thinking about those pictures. How did they get them? What are they going to do with them next?" Sarah typed back, "Get some rest. I'm working on it. By tomorrow evening, this situation is going to look very different." The response was deliberately vague but carried the confidence of someone who had developed a comprehensive plan for neutralizing the threat. Sarah's military training had taught her that the most effective operations began with careful preparation and ended with decisive action that left enemies unable to continue their attacks. Madison. Pierce was about to learn that some targets fight back. Wednesday morning arrived with crisp autumn air that seemed to sharpen Sarah's focus as she executed the first phase of her counter-operation. She had risen before dawn to conduct final preparations, reviewing her intelligence files and confirming that all necessary digital tools were ready for deployment. Her military training had taught her that successful operations depended on meticulous preparation and flawless timing, principles that applied equally to combat missions and civilian psychological warfare. Sarah arrived at the photography studio 30 minutes before class, using her early access to conduct physical reconnaissance of the space and prepare her technical equipment. She positioned her laptop at her usual workstation, but had modified its configuration to include specialized software that would allow her to monitor and document digital activities across the classroom network. The tools Sarah was deploying had been developed for military intelligence operations, but were perfectly suited for exposing civilian cybercriminal activities. Her laptop could now detect unauthorized network access, document data theft attempts, and trace digital communications in real time, creating an evidence trail that would support both college disciplinary proceedings and potential criminal charges. As students filtered into the studio, Sarah observed Madison's group with the detached, analytical focus she had used when monitoring enemy positions during reconnaissance missions. Their behavior patterns indicated confidence bordering on arrogance, the kind of overconfidence that led to operational security failures and tactical mistakes. Madison entered with her usual theatrical flair, but Sarah's trained eye detected subtle signs of stress beneath the performative confidence. Her movements were slightly more rigid than usual, her smile required more effort to maintain, and she checked her phone more frequently than normal. The digital surveillance Sarah had conducted the previous evening was apparently creating pressure, even if Madison didn't yet understand its source. Chloe approached the computer terminals with the technical confidence that had served her well during previous attacks, but today she was walking into a digital environment that Sarah had prepared specifically to expose her methods. Every keystroke, every file access, and every network connection would be monitored and documented by systems that Chloe didn't know existed. Jessica positioned herself to provide social cover for Chloe's technical operations, engaging other students in casual conversation designed to distract attention from whatever digital activities were being conducted. But Sarah's military training had taught her to maintain awareness of multiple simultaneous activities, and Jessica's social engineering would not prevent comprehensive documentation of Chloe's criminal behavior. Emma arrived looking exhausted and anxious, her confidence shattered by the previous day's attack, but her determination to complete her education drove her to attend class, despite her emotional trauma. Sarah felt a surge of protective anger at seeing the damage that Madison's group had inflicted on an innocent student, whose only crime had been excelling academically while coming from a working class background. Professor Williams began the class with his usual technical instruction, announcing that today's session would focus on digital ethics and privacy considerations in photography. The irony of the topic was not lost on Sarah, who recognized that Madison's group would be forced to participate in discussions about exactly the principles they had systematically violated during their campaign against Emma. The first phase of Sarah's operation began when Professor Williams asked students to share examples of ethical challenges they had encountered in their photographic work. Sarah raised her hand and was recognized to speak, using the opportunity to establish an educational framework for what would follow. I think one of the most serious ethical violations in digital photography is when people gain unauthorized access to private images and use them to humiliate or intimidate others, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly across the studio. It's not just unethical, it's criminal behavior that violates both state and federal privacy laws. The comment was delivered with academic neutrality but carried implications that caused visible reactions from Madison's group. Chloe's fingers stopped moving across her keyboard. Madison's performative smile faltered slightly, and Jessica's conversation with nearby students became noticeably forced. Professor Williams nodded enthusiastically, apparently pleased that one of his quieter students was contributing meaningfully to the discussion. Excellent point, Sarah. Privacy violations in digital media represent a serious breach of professional ethics. Can anyone provide specific examples of how such violations might occur? Sarah had anticipated this question and was prepared with a response that would establish the technical foundation for her operation. Unauthorized access typically occurs through social engineering attacks, where victims are manipulated into providing access to their devices, or through malware deployment that allows remote access to private files. The technical description was accurate enough to serve as educational content, while specifically describing the methods that Chloe had used against Emma and previous victims. Sarah watched as Chloe's expression shifted from confidence to concern, apparently recognizing that someone in the classroom possessed technical knowledge that threatened her operational security. "Those methods sound quite sophisticated," Professor Williams observed. "Would such activities require advanced technical training, or could they be conducted by typical college students?" Sarah's response was carefully calibrated to apply psychological pressure while maintaining plausible academic discussion. "The tools are readily available online, and the techniques are well documented in cybersecurity literature. Any college student with sufficient motivation and lack of ethical constraints could conduct such attacks against their classmates." The statement hung in the air like an accusation, causing Madison's group to exchange nervous glances while other students began to understand that the discussion might be more than academic. Sarah had successfully introduced the possibility that cybercriminal activity was occurring within their own classroom environment. Emma looked up from her equipment with dawning hope as she realized that Sarah's comments might be related to her own experience. The previous day's attack had left her feeling isolated and helpless, but Sarah's technical knowledge suggested that there might be ways to fight back against the forces that had victimized her. Kevin Martinez positioned himself closer to Sarah's workstation, apparently recognizing that something significant was developing and wanting to observe the proceedings from the best possible vantage point. His expression showed the excitement of someone who had been waiting years to see Madison's group face consequences for their systematic abuse of vulnerable students. The second phase of Sarah's operation began when Professor Williams announced that students would be working on individual portfolio development while he provided one-on-one consultations. The distributed activity would provide perfect cover for Sarah to begin exposing the digital evidence she had gathered while maintaining the appearance of routine academic work. Sarah opened her laptop and activated the monitoring software, immediately detecting multiple unauthorized network connections originating from Chloe's workstation. The evidence confirmed that Chloe was conducting active cybercriminal operations during class time, using the college's network infrastructure to maintain access to compromised devices and social media accounts. The real-time monitoring revealed the full scope of Chloe's digital intrusion capabilities. Her computer was simultaneously connected to Emma's compromised accounts, several fake social media profiles used for surveillance, and what appeared to be a coordination server that managed the distribution of stolen content across multiple platforms. Sarah activated her documentation protocols, creating time-stamped records of every unauthorized access attempt and data theft operation that Chloe was conducting. The evidence would be sufficient to support both college disciplinary proceedings and federal criminal charges under computer fraud and abuse statutes. More importantly, for immediate tactical purposes, Sarah's monitoring had identified the command and control systems that Madison's group used to coordinate their attacks. By mapping their digital infrastructure, Sarah could now disrupt their operations while simultaneously gathering evidence of their criminal activities. The third phase required direct confrontation, but Sarah had learned during military operations that the most effective attacks began with psychological preparation that undermined enemy confidence and coordination. She began by approaching Emma's workstation under the pretext of offering technical assistance. "Emma, I noticed some unusual network activity that might be related to yesterday's technical problems," Sarah said, her voice pitched to carry to Pew Madison's group while maintaining the appearance of helpful consultation. "Someone appears to be maintaining unauthorized access to accounts and devices associated with your digital identity." Emma's eyes widened as she understood the implication that her violation was ongoing rather than a single incident. "You mean they're still doing things to me, right now?" "The unauthorized access is active and continuous," Sarah confirmed, using technical language that would be understood by anyone with cybersecurity knowledge. "But I've been monitoring the intrusion attempts. And I have comprehensive documentation of the criminal activities being conducted. The conversation was deliberately conducted at a volume that ensured Madison's group could hear every word, creating psychological pressure while establishing that their activities were under active surveillance by someone with technical capabilities that exceeded their own. Chloe's reaction confirmed that Sarah's assessment was accurate. Her fingers moved frantically across her keyboard, apparently attempting to disable or conceal the digital operations that Sarah had exposed. But Sarah's military-grade monitoring software was designed to detect and document exactly such cleanup attempts, creating additional evidence of criminal intent and obstruction. Madison rose from her workstation and approached Sarah and Emma. With the predatory confidence that had served her well during previous confrontations, apparently believing that social pressure could neutralize the technical threat that Sarah represented. "I'm sorry, but I couldn't help overhearing your conversation," Madison said, her voice carrying false concern that fooled no one. "Are you suggesting that someone in our class is conducting criminal activities? That seems like a very serious accusation to make without evidence." Sarah met Madison's gaze with the steady eye contact she had perfected during military leadership training, recognizing the challenge for what it was and preparing to demonstrate exactly what kind of evidence she had gathered. Sarah turned her laptop screen toward Madison with deliberate precision, displaying real-time network monitoring data that showed active unauthorized connections, streaming from Chloe's workstation to multiple compromised accounts and devices. The technical display was damning in its clarity, showing timestamps, IP addresses, and data transfer logs that documented ongoing criminal activity occurring at that very moment. "This is the evidence," Sarah said, her voice carrying the calm authority she had used when briefing superior officers during military operations. Live monitoring data showing unauthorized access to private accounts, active data exfiltration, and coordinated social media manipulation being conducted from this classroom right now. Madison's confident expression faltered as she processed the technical information displayed on Sarah's screen. The data was comprehensive and undeniable, showing not just current criminal activity, but also historical logs that documented weeks of systematic privacy violations against multiple targets. Chloe had abandoned any pretense of working on class assignments and was frantically typing across multiple applications, apparently attempting to terminate her unauthorized connections and delete evidence of her activities. But Sarah's monitoring software was designed to detect and document exactly such cleanup attempts, creating additional evidence of criminal intent and consciousness of guilt. "I don't understand what I'm looking at," Madison said, attempting to maintain her social dominance through feigned ignorance. "This could be anything. Computer screens full of numbers don't prove anything specific about anyone in our class." Sarah had anticipated this response and activated a secondary display that translated the technical data into terms that any observer could understand. The screen now showed a real-time map of unauthorized access attempts, with clear labels identifying compromised accounts and the physical location of the attacking computer. "The source location is 15 feet from where we're standing," Sarah explained, gesturing toward Chloe's workstation. "The compromised accounts include Emma's Instagram, Facebook, and Gmail, along with accounts belonging to at least 6 other students who have been targeted over the past 2 years." The revelation caused a ripple of shock through the classroom, as students realized they might be witnessing the exposure of criminal activities that had been conducted against their classmates for months or years. Several students moved closer to observe Sarah's evidence display, their expressions shifting from curiosity to outrage as they understood the implications. Emma stared at the screen with growing anger as she saw the real-time documentation of her continued victimization. "They're still in my accounts right now. They've been watching everything I do, reading my private messages, accessing my photos." "The unauthorized access has been continuous since yesterday's attack," Sarah confirmed, using her military training. in victim advocacy to help Emma understand her situation, while building the emotional foundation for what would follow. But now we have comprehensive documentation of the criminal activities, including evidence that can support both college disciplinary proceedings and federal criminal charges. Professor Williams approached the group, drawn by the increasingly intense discussion and the crowd of students gathering around Sarah's workstation. His expression showed confusion about the technical content being displayed, but growing concern about the serious tone of the conversation. "What exactly is happening here?" Professor Williams asked, looking between Sarah's evidence display and Madison's group with the bewildered expression of someone who had stumbled into a situation far beyond his expertise. Sarah recognized this as the moment to transition from intelligence gathering to official reporting, activating the institutional response mechanisms that would protect Emma and other victims while ensuring appropriate consequences for Madison's group's criminal activities. "Professor Williams, I'm documenting active cybercriminal operations being conducted against students in this class," Sarah said, using formal language that established the seriousness of the situation. "I have real-time evidence of unauthorized computer access, identity theft, and coordinated harassment that violates both college policies and federal criminal statutes." The academic framework transformed the situation from social drama into institutional crisis, forcing Professor Williams to respond with administrative procedures rather than artistic sensibilities. His expression shifted from confusion to alarm, as he began to understand that he might be witnessing criminal activities occurring during his class. Chloe made a final desperate attempt to conceal her activities by shutting down her laptop entirely, but Sarah's monitoring had already captured comprehensive logs of her digital operations. The evidence would survive any attempt at destruction and had been automatically backed up to secure servers that Chloe couldn't access or compromise. "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding," Jessica interjected, apparently recognizing that Madison's group needed to implement damage control procedures. "Sarah seems very upset about some technical issues, but that doesn't mean anyone has done anything wrong." The gaslighting attempt was textbook perfect, designed to reframe comprehensive criminal evidence as emotional overreaction while providing Madison's group with plausible deniability. But Sarah's military training had prepared her for exactly this type of psychological manipulation from adversaries attempting to escape accountability. "There's no misunderstanding," Sarah replied, activating an additional display that showed the fake social media accounts Chloe had used to conduct surveillance against her targets. These accounts were created specifically to gather intelligence on students before launching coordinated attacks designed to force them to withdraw from the college. The evidence was devastating in its scope and precision, showing not just technical violations but systematic psychological warfare conducted against vulnerable students over an extended period. The fake accounts contained surveillance data on dozens of students, with particular focus on scholarship recipients and anyone from working-class backgrounds. Kevin Martinez moved closer to Sarah's workstation, his expression showing the satisfaction of someone who had waited years to see Madison's group face consequences for their systematic abuse. "This explains so much," he said, loud enough for surrounding students to hear. "All those students who just disappeared, who transferred schools without explanation. They were being systematically targeted and driven away." The revelation transformed the classroom atmosphere as students began to understand that they had been witnesses to and possibly victims of organized criminal activity disguised as social dynamics. Conversations erupted throughout the studio as classmates shared their own experiences with unexplained technical problems, privacy violations, and social media harassment. Madison's social dominance began crumbling as the institutional protection that had shielded her group's activities proved useless against documented criminal evidence. Her wealth and family connections couldn't alter technical logs or explain away real-time monitoring data that showed ongoing illegal activities. Professor Williams, I recommend that you contact campus security and the college administration. Immediately, Sarah said, using the command voice she had perfected during military leadership training. This evidence documents federal crimes that require immediate investigation by law enforcement authorities. The suggestion activated Professor Williams' administrative instincts, forcing him to follow institutional procedures for handling criminal activities occurring on campus property. He reached for his phone with obvious reluctance, but clear understanding that the situation had escalated beyond his ability to manage through normal classroom procedures. Emma found her voice for the first time since the previous day's attack, her anger finally overcoming her fear and confusion. "You destroyed my life for entertainment," she said, looking directly at Madison with newfound strength. "You made me feel like I was worthless, like I didn't belong here, like I was stupid, for thinking I could succeed at college." The emotional impact was devastating, stripping away the social veneer that had allowed Madison's group to frame their criminal activities as legitimate social dynamics. Emma's pain was authentic and immediate, providing human context for the technical evidence that Sarah had assembled. Chloe made one final attempt to escape accountability by claiming technical ignorance. "I don't know what Sarah thinks she's detected, but I was just working on class assignments. Maybe her monitoring software is malfunctioning or showing false positives." Sarah had anticipated this defense and activated a final evidence display that showed video recordings of Chloe's activities captured by the classroom security cameras. The footage clearly showed Chloe accessing unauthorized accounts while conducting surveillance operations against Emma and other students. "The security camera footage confirms the technical evidence," Sarah said, combining visual documentation with digital logs to create an evidentiary package that would support prosecution under multiple criminal statutes. "Everything has been documented and preserved according to federal law enforcement standards." The comprehensive nature of Sarah's evidence gathering became apparent as she revealed the full scope of her counter-operation. She had not only detected and documented Madison's group's current activities, but had also traced their historical operations, identified their victims, and assembled prosecutorial quality evidence that would ensure appropriate consequences. Madison stood frozen in the center of the studio as her world collapsed around her. The social dominance that had defined her identity was evaporating as classmates who had once sought her approval now looked at her with disgust and revulsion. The institutional protection that her family's wealth had purchased proved worthless. Against documented federal crimes, Professor Williams completed his call to campus security and announced that the class was suspended pending investigation by college administrators and law enforcement authorities. Students began gathering their equipment while discussing the shocking revelations that had transformed their understanding of the social dynamics that had governed their educational environment. Sarah closed her laptop with the satisfaction of someone who had successfully completed a complex military operation against a well-resourced enemy. Madison's group's years of operating with impunity were over. Their victims would receive justice, and the broader college community would be protected from future attacks. The revolution had begun. 3 months later, the transformation at Riverside Community College was complete. Madison Pierce had been expelled and faced federal charges for computer fraud and identity theft. Chloe Kim was serving community service and attending mandatory cybersecurity ethics courses. Jessica Walsh had transferred schools after her family's real estate contracts with the college were terminated. Emma Rodriguez thrived in the new environment Sarah had helped create. Her photography exhibition, featuring the same East Los Angeles images that had once been used to humiliate her, won the college's annual Student Art Award. She started a support group for transfer students that became one of the most popular organizations on campus. Sarah's counter-operation had exposed a network of institutional corruption that reached beyond Madison's group. The investigation revealed that wealthy families had been using donations and contracts to shield their children's criminal behavior for years. New policies now protected students from digital harassment and required transparency in disciplinary proceedings. Professor Williams approached Sarah after the final photography class of the semester. "You saved this program," he said quietly. "You saved this school. Those students you exposed had been poisoning our community for years." Sarah graduated summa cum laude and was accepted into a prestigious graduate program in cybersecurity. Emma became her research partner, focusing on protecting vulnerable populations from digital predators. Kevin Martinez documented their story in a photography series that toured college campuses nationwide, warning students about sophisticated bullying operations. The last photo in Kevin's exhibition showed Sarah and Emma working together in a computer lab with the caption, "Sometimes the best defense is someone who refuses to be defeated." What did you think of Sarah's incredible transformation from victim to victor? Have you ever witnessed sophisticated bullying like this? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories of people who fought back against impossible odds and won. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads.